That's right. By connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you get one free Prime subscription a month.
Streamer.
That way you can avoid those ads. Here's the 1 minute ad break now.
In particular, as part of a covert effort to stop them attaining stability, building wealth, and achieving political power.
Much like your drug dealer, I'm also late on delivering your fucking top of the hour ad. You know what I'm saying? All right, I gotta pee real quick.
African American, there's no doubt about that whatsoever. And for the other non-African people, they should know that this directly will harm them too.
These ideas took particular hold in the 1980s with the emergence of the so-called crack epidemic. It's easy to understand how people of color may not believe that US authorities have their best interests at heart. But do these particular drug charges stick? Did the intelligence agencies actually play a role in flooding American cities with cocaine? In this episode, we're exploring whether the CIA was actually responsible for the crack epidemic and how exactly this story gained so much traction. The story of the CIA and crack cocaine doesn't actually begin on the streets of LA or Miami. It begins in the jungles of Central America. In 1979, the dictatorial government of Nicaragua was overthrown by socialist revolutionaries called the Sandinistas. In response, right-wing groups known as the Contras began a brutal paramilitary campaign, receiving money and weapons from the CIA as part of the Cold War struggle against the Soviet Union.
If we cut off the freedom fighters, we will be giving the Soviets a free hand in Central America, handing them one of their greatest foreign policy victories since World War II.
But in 1982, Democrats in Congress passed laws to cut off support for the Nicaraguan rebels. So the Contras and their CIA backers had to find new ways of funding their struggle. What they found was cocaine. By the late 1970s, more people in the US were snorting coke than ever before. Most of it imported from Colombia. In the early 80s, smokable cocaine, or crack, exploded across American cities. This proved to be a gold mine for countless organized crime groups, even those backed by the CIA.
Today, cocaine and marijuana are found throughout our society from top to bottom. And that means corruption, top to bottom, and gang war violence.
The Contras were soon linked with Colombian cartels, and in 1985,
how'd they get there?
Reporters Robert Parry and Brian
How'd the cocaine get here? This is crazy.
Barger broke an almost unbelievable story. They claimed Nicaraguan rebels were involved in cocaine trafficking, and that not only did the CIA know about these activities, they allowed them to continue in order to help fund the Contras' war effort.
When Bob Perry and Brian Barger got a hold of a CIA report revealing...
What's the biggest epidemic of this, of the 2020s, and even leading up to like late, 2010s, 2020s? Fentanyl, right? Heroin, opioid epidemic, right? It's crazy, just, CIA would never involve themselves with that one as well, right? I mean, certainly not. That's crazy. Just like wherever black budgets can be beefed up, find drugs that can fill up those coffers. The American government suspiciously will be controlling territories somehow.
Was finally pushed into this community after Jimmy Dore started talking
That
shit about
have.
painting your nails. Not based at all. If that's all your opponents have against you, then I believe I'm in the right place.
Thank you, the lonely nut.
that they were working in the mid-1980s with Contras fighting the Sandinista government. They were warned by their editors that this was not something that was...
Don't forget, Afghanistan poppy, it doesn't actually go into America. That fentanyl is coming directly from Mexico. Now, the link between, the cartels in Mexico and special forces training, that one is a little bit shakier. The Afghan fentanyl, the Afghan opium that actually ended up on the streets was just in the streets of Europe and everywhere else. Or not fentanyl, the heroin. Fentanyl is synthetic. It's not made of opium. Sorry. Heroin.
It was going to make the people that own their newspapers very happy, and most of them ended up losing their jobs.
At this point, the CIA strongly denied that they were involved in the drug trade. But on the streets, the rumors began to spread.
Yeah, no, pharmaceutical grade opium comes from Tasmania. That's different. That's not what we're talking about. And that is actually, bought and sold by pharmaceutical corporations, which are also responsible for the opioid crisis, the opioid epidemic. Fentanyl in the United States comes from Mexico. Majority of it. The opium or the heroin that you see, street level heroin that you see in other parts of the world, not America, come from Afghanistan.
That the government was either actively or passively allowing crack to be sold. These remained just rumors until 1996, when a reporter with the San Jose Mercury News named Gary Webb picked up the story from a new angle. Webb investigated the case of Freeway Rick Ross, who in the early 1980s was the most important kingpin in LA's crack scene, and probably America's first ever crack millionaire.
What's the most money you ever made in a day?
$3 million.
What Webb uncovered was that Ross's main cocaine supplier was a guy named Danilo Blandon, a Nicaraguan exile who funneled tens of thousands of dollars.
Which, by the way, fun fact, Rick Ross, the Rick Ross Teflon Don, Rick Ross that you know as the rapper, was actually a CO and just like totally fucking stole this, Highway Rick Ross's name, become a rapper, but he was actually a CO.
In cocaine profits back to the Contras through banks in Miami. Blandon, in turn, worked for Norwin Menezes, perhaps the biggest
not
drug
Highway,
trafficker
Freeway
in
Rick Ross, sorry.
who had deep ties
Whatever,
to the
dude.
Contra leadership.
Whatever, fucking shut up, okay? My brain is not working.
And was widely thought to benefit from CIA
Shut up.
protection.
The DEA had always tried to arrest Nora Menezes, who was living openly and raising money for
No,
the
a lot of
Contras
people don't
had
know
never
that.
been
People literally don't know Rick Ross, the rapper, is like a fucking a CO. Like they don't realize that. High speed rail Rick Ross. Yeah, talk to me when you're high speed rail.
Hasan is also CI.
No, he's a corrections officer, not a CI. A corrections officer. He was a cop. He worked in the prison system. Here. Him, I got photos. Have you never seen this? Like, you guys have never seen this? There you go. Oh. Another photo. Hold on. This one's pretty funny. Here.
able to build a case against him, and felt like there was something about this guy that must explain why they couldn't do that he was protected, in other words. And when Gary Webb's story came along, he not only showed where the connection was between Menezes and Blandon and Freeway Ricky Ross, but he also went into all this history and unveiled how there was a very large, well-documented crack distribution ring that had operated for years, with the CIA turning a blind eye.
What's the process you go through?
I love the Jim Norton show is like the revelatory, the revelatory investigative reporting component here is the fucking Jim Norton show, dude. That's hilarious. I'm sorry.
You're the guy on top, and where do you get your coke from?
I was getting my coke from a guy by the name of Oscar Danilo Blandon, who also was my informant. He's a guy that set me up with the police. When I went to trial, we found out that he was what they call a Contra. the Contras was backed by the CIA. And it sparked this big investigation by this reporter called Gary Webb.
In August of 1996, the Mercury News published Webb's reports in a 3-part series titled Dark Alliance. The story grabbed attention across the US, particularly amongst the African American community, which had been targeted by law enforcement following the rise of crack.
Tell America what the story is about. It was about a cocaine ring that operated along the west coast of the United States.
It's crazy what happened to this guy, you know? He just felt really fucked up about everything that he uncovered, I guess. You know? He just felt conflicted. And I guess he didn't have, you know, the Logic song to listen to. So
United
crazy.
States throughout most of the 80s. And some of the money they were making was going to support an army that the men who ran the cocaine ring worked for, called the FDN. This was an army that the CIA...
Literally, for the record, for those of you who don't know what I'm saying, Jeffrey Epstein is not the last or the first time that an important asset to our 3-letter agencies suspiciously suicided themselves. You know, or was suicided. Gary Webb's official cause of death is still considered a suicide, despite the fact that, you know, he had not 1, but 2 gunshot wounds to the back of the head. Impressive.
They started in 1981 and supported...
Better known to us, most of us who remember news, the Contras.
Nowhere in Dark Alliance did Webb explicitly assert that the CIA was responsible for the crack epidemic, let alone that they intentionally sold the drug. But that was the narrative that got picked up in the popular imagination, probably not helped by the Mercury News illustrating the feature with an image of a guy smoking a crack pipe superimposed on the CIA logo. But the story took off not just due to his explosive claims, but also because of another new and highly addictive force that had begun to reshape American society: the internet. Dark Alliance was the first major piece of investigative journalism to be published simultaneously in print and online. The story went viral, getting picked up by everyone from street protesters to talk radio hosts and eventually politicians looking to attack the Reagan and Bush administrations. California Congresswoman Maxine Waters became a particular champion of the piece.
As a public elected officials, all of us must be concerned that our government could have anyway been involved in drug trafficking.
The reaction to the story was so intense that the CIA director took the unprecedented step of defending the agency at a heated LA community meeting.
It is an appalling charge that goes to the heart of this country. I will get to the bottom of it, and I will let you know the results of what I found.
How are we supposed to trust the CIA official to investigate themselves?
What was equally shocking, though, was the reaction of America's mainstream media. Webb and the San Jose Mercury News often maintained that Dark Alliance was intended as the beginning of an investigation that larger newspapers with more resources could then continue. But what actually happened...
I just want to point something else out again. He was found dead in his home, and the official ruling was suicide. And I want to mention once again that there weren't 1, but 2 gunshot wounds. 2.
1 more month before
Like,
1 year POG.
Incredibly sloppy shit. Okay? 2.
Happened was that instead of investigating the CIA, major papers like the LA Times, Washington Post, and New York Times all attacked Webb himself. Webb was eventually hounded from his job and found himself unable to work as a journalist. He died by suicide in 2004.
Oh, come on. That's it? Oh, come on, dude. Are you serious? That's all they say about this?
All 3 major newspapers felt completely caught off guard by this story, so they fully attacked Gary Webb with a vengeance, unlike anything that had ever been seen before, and completely attempted to not only discredit his story and frame it as a conspiracy theory, but pretty much ruin his entire reputation.
We saw a complete failure, perhaps one of the most shameful examples of how the mainstream press can operate in destroying.
The reason, for the record, the reason why I wanted to mention it is because people just, Vice didn't even mention the 2 gunshot wounds, not 1, 2 gunshot wounds. Okay? I just want to mention once again, not 1, 2 gunshot wounds to the back of the dome in this apparent suicide.
A fellow journalist for getting at an important story. And Webb suffered mightily for this.
But as people got more and more lost in the minutiae of attacking or defending Webb's journalism, the focus...
Yes, that's where the meme suicide by 2 shots in the back of the head comes from. Yes.
on the CIA's involvement in the drug trade began to get lost. A fact that internal CIA documents held up as a good example of managing a public relations nightmare. But in 1998, the CIA's own Inspector General released a report essentially admitting that many elements of the Dark Alliance story were true, that the agency had known that people linked with the Contras were importing cocaine, had done nothing to stop them, and had even protected them from investigation.
By the way, this is the part of it that is like really fucked up. Okay? Years later, they will conduct an investigation, but because the media is always operating in unison with the State Department, because the media is always operating in unison when it comes to foreign policy issues that ends up becoming like domestic policy problems, okay? That nobody gives a fuck when they declassify this shit. At the time when you mention it, you're looked at like a fucking psycho. You're like, oh, whatever, dude. Get the fuck out of here. Oh, there's a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy. And then years later, the CIA is like, oh, yeah, we did that. That was sick when we did that. You know, it was actually pretty cool when we did that. And it's not a big deal, actually. So shut the fuck up. Alex Jones' take? I know. Well, my takes on Alex Jones are also interesting as well, if you want to know that. I 100% think Alex Jones is a CIA op. Straight up. I believe it. I 100% believe that Alex Jones is a CIA op to vilify conspiracies that are real, conspiracy to murder, conspiracies like fucking, Webb's murder, Jeffrey Epstein's murder, shit like that will look strange when you have a guy championing conspiracy theories that also say that and a million other things that are psychotic. Think about it. I think the real conspiracy in that situation is having a guy having a very loud and very fucking public face of like all conspiracy theories be someone like Alex Jones. Do you genuinely believe that, or is that just a meme? No, I do. I do believe it. I do. I do believe it. Especially because, like, you know, Joe Rogan loves fucking having CIA assets on his show. And being like, oh, I love conspiracy theories. And then he has like Alex Jones and like fucking Mike Baker or whatever on. Since I first heard that from you, I believe it 100%. Yes. Now you're reaching. Yeah, dude. The American intelligence apparatus would never do such a wild thing. You know, like they would also never fucking, use LSD to try to figure out ways of mind controlling people or a million other things that they've literally done that they openly declassify afterwards. You know, oh man, our intelligence apparatus would never fucking infiltrate, intercept black radical communist groups and even assassinate their leadership, like literally directly at night while they're sleeping. Things like that could never happen. Those are all conspiracy theories. Like, none of that is a conspiracy theory. Those are all well-documented, factually true, factually correct takes that they straight up fucking openly admit. It's not even... That's the crazy thing, is that, like, everything I just mentioned to you just now is openly out and about declassified information. None of it is a secret. Now, at least. I'm pro Hanlon's razor. Never attribute to malice what you can attribute to stupidity. Honestly, I don't know, man. It's the shit they do not declassify that you have to be really suspicious of, is all I'm going to say.
You had the CIA finally coming to the table and admitting that what we reported in the 80s and what Webb reported in the 90s was in fact true.
Mr. Menezes was actually...
Wild, dude. Written in pain, Gary Webb planned his death with polite precision. He typed out 4 lengthy suicide notes and put them in the mail to family members. He placed his prearranged cremation certificate. This article, unironically, and trigger warning, suicide, I'm going to read this. This article unironically states, he pulled the trigger and the bullet sliced through his face, exiting his left cheek, a non-fatal wound, so he pulled the trigger again. He literally shot himself in the head with his revolver twice. Wild to consider that the Los Angeles Times would just write such insanity so openly. No, it is non-fatal. You can a lot of suicides to the head. A lot of times when people try to kill themselves with a gun by putting it in their mouth or whatever, they fucking miss and then they fuck themselves up for the rest of their lives. Like, it's a lot more difficult than you would think. But nobody fucking shoots themselves twice in the head. You hear the story of people surviving and then being fucked up permanently for the rest of their lives. You don't hear the story of them, ever. I mean, ever. Double tapping themselves.
Could you review my ban? I would appreciate it.
It actually happens. The first shot, they aren't sure and anxiety comes in. They don't get it right. They gain the confidence. That's literally not true. That's fucking straight up. I know he wrote suicide letters to his family and his ex-wife believed it was suicide. That's crazy. You never forged shit like that. You're right. I mean, the FBI never famously tried to get Martin Luther King to commit suicide by writing such letters, for example. Not on behalf of him, but to him, and blackmailing him regularly to try to you know. Anyway. Let's continue.
Indicted in 1984. He was known within my own sources in DEA told me he was known as El Rey de la Droga, the king of drugs. He was in more than 40 files and indicted mysteriously, and people within DEA say that it was CIA intervention that kept this sealed indictment from ever being opened.
In one case detailed in the report, when traffickers linked to the Nicaraguan king of drugs, Norwin Menezes, were busted in San Francisco in 1983, the CIA even requested that tens of thousands of dollars, which had been seized, be returned to the drug traffickers.
The CIA admitted that they knew that these guys were selling drugs and had went to the Attorney General and asked the Attorney General could they not report it because the mission that they were trying to accomplish was so big. It was a matter of U.S., what do they call it?
National security?
National security.
So wait, the U.S., the CIA was allowing this just kind of to happen, the drugs to go in, and they weren't putting it there, but they were allowing it to happen and funneling the money.
That's what we believe.
This is a complex story, but let's try to answer the big questions. Did the CIA actually sell crack? On the evidence we've got, no. There were no agents with sunglasses and earpieces slinging rocks on the streets.
Bro, yeah, the CIA doesn't sell crack in the same way that like Hershey's doesn't take advantage of child slave labor. They outsource it. What the fuck do you mean? That doesn't mean they're not doing it directionally and totally not only not turning just a blind eye to it, but like literally doing it, paying the people that are doing it, not investigating the people that they're doing it, protecting the people that they're doing it. That's fucking insane. How can you make this video and then that's the conclusion you arrive at? What the fuck?
Of Compton. Did the CIA work with and protect major drug traffickers? Yes, absolutely. They've been forced to admit that publicly. The real tragedy here is that as far as...
Bro, people think the CIA is a bunch of fucking dudes wearing aviators and like, you know, clapping motherfuckers. And it's, at a certain point, they probably had some field agents that were like that, and I'm sure they still do, okay? But now, and even back then, it was like accountants, okay? It was, you know, there's still plenty of fucking analyst motherfuckers in the CIA. They're not gonna go out in the streets and directly sell crack. They're going to convert CIs. They're going to arrest people and then work with the people that they've arrested and tell them, hey, you're arrested now, bitch. You're my bitch now. You're going to do the things I want you to do. It's fine. You can keep doing it. But you can keep being out and about. But you need to do what I want you to do, okay? Which is sell crack. Why no one thinks that they're like, you know, dealing on the streets. You know what I mean? No one.
As we know, no one from the CIA or the mainstream media even lost their jobs over this. The only people who suffered for it were the journalists who exposed the story and the millions of people targeted by the unjust and racist laws that were passed in response to the 1980s.
I mean, they're basically saying they sold it without saying they sold it.
We'd like to congratulate.
So I don't know what else to say about that. He's right. The service bureaucracy may not have ordered their asses to do this or even wanted this, but once they internally discovered some of their asses were making money doing this, they decided it was an acceptable outcome to achieve their foreign policy aims. I think the most interesting part about these black budget operations, okay, is the fact that, like, the Pentagon has a fucking gaping hole in it, okay? Straight up. Like, a gigantic fucking hole in it. What is it, like $35 trillion in accounting is just gone missing. No one knows. And even then, it's not enough. How? Like, there is already a $35 trillion accounting black hole in the Pentagon, okay? So we don't know where $35 trillion is. There's no accounting for it. We don't know where it is. We will never figure out where it is, okay? We'll never know where it went. But on top of that, it's still like, even with that level of money being gone missing, it's not enough. And then we still need to keep funding these sorts of operations to continuously fund other shit that we're doing, other destabilizing efforts that we're engaging in. CIA Gladio'yu kurdu. Komünistlere mücadele adı altında 90'lar Türkiye'ye geldi. Afganistan üzerinden getirdiği uyuşturucuyu Avrupa'ya satmaya başladı. Balkanlar üzerinden bunu yaydı şu an. Yeni bir uyuşturucu koridoru açıldı. Brezilya'dan gelen uyuşturucular Türkiye üzerinden ve Yunanistan üzerinden Avrupa'ya yayılıyor. Turkish people are Turkish man talking about fucking Gladio and NATO involvement in Turkey and how it ties back to America's drug running operation by by way of Turkey opening up drug sale corridors. CIA doesn't involve himself in that sort of behavior. That's why they swiftly remove rogue agents from the agency. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I'm just saying, it's fucking wild that like 35 trillion is not enough. That they still have other shit on top of that.
"9 months poggies."